Hey everybody! Since the last devlog, Caves of Combat has changed dramatically, from combat and feedback to progression and polish. If you're new here, this is an action roguelike platformer I've been building by myself for years, and it's finally almost ready for a free demo on Steam. Building on the health and damage systems from the last video, I converted the enemies and the player to use the same systems. Now, every hit feels better, both dealing damage and taking it. I also untangled some overly coupled systems and removed some redundant code in the process. Going forward, it should be a lot easier to add new effects and to build on this simple and effective base. Under the hood, I've rebalanced a lot of stats to make upgrades more interesting and scalable. By scaling up the health and damage, abilities can increase the player's damage without feeling too strong. Previously, the player dealt only 1 damage, so just giving the player 1 more damage resulted in twice as much damage. Now the player starts with 5 damage, gains 1 every time they level up, and can also gain damage from abilities without feeling overpowered. These changes to the damage scaling also allowed me to implement a new ability, Lacerate. This ability applies a bleed effect to any enemy hit by the player a certain number of times in a given time frame. The bleed effect deals a fixed amount of damage over a set duration. It's already pretty fun to play with and opens up the door for future synergies. In addition to this ability, I've also planned a whole list of other great ideas that I hope to add soon. While showing a friend some of these ideas, he pointed out that one in particular was more of a detriment than a buff. This comment spurred a list of new abilities that actively hinder the player called curses. These would not be standalone purchases in the shop. Instead, they would be attached to the abilities and add another layer of tension to decision making. Curses will make for a great post-game option to increase the difficulty in a way that the previous Ascension system really failed at. To get the game ready for playtesting, I focused the back half of this development period on the feedback and clarity of the game. My biggest priority was making sure that anyone who picked up the game could figure out what to do and how to play. The first thing I did to help with this was to add pixelated outlines around interactable objects so that they had a distinct visual language. This sent me down a shader graph rabbit hole, learning UV maps, sprite padding, and all kinds of pixel magic. Because of my approach, I had to re-import all of my sprites with padding around the artwork so that the UV map had enough space for the outline. Next, I added icons for each of the different ways you can interact with the game. These icons are directly connected to the action map and dynamically update to reflect the current control scheme. Overall, I think they serve their purpose, but I want to iterate on how they're integrated to reduce the complexity of certain UI elements. Lastly, I improved the feedback for invalid actions so that there are both visual and auditory cues. For example, when you're in a boss fight, you can't leave the level until the boss is defeated, so trying to enter a locked door jiggles the lock and explains the issue. Other examples include trying to purchase something without the required gold. Now, the gold display performs a similar red shake to highlight the source of the issue. Finally, the HUD for the abilities has also been overhauled with a new position, orientation, and empty slot icons. Errors related to the available slots will highlight the indicator at the bottom of the container so the player is aware. Another objective for the demo involved tuning the procedural generation to be consistently fair. Before, level sizes were unpredictable, sometimes too small to explore, sometimes giant and empty. Now, I measure the air-to-ground ratio and regenerate if it's off balance. That keeps gameplay consistent and pacing tight. This gives me precise control over the size of the levels I want the player to experience and the variance between them. Another problem this analysis fixed was the enemy and spike abundance. Before these changes, the generator always spawned a set amount of each. Now the abundance is normalized by the size of the level, meaning larger levels have more enemies and vice versa. This means the player is less likely to be overwhelmed by a swarm of enemies due to unlucky RNG. However, this solution came with a cost. When a level fails to pass its validation check, it reruns the entire ground generation algorithm. This process involves manipulating a large tile map that ultimately tanks the performance. The problem here is that the player can pan the camera, and I had to make the tile map so large that they could never see beyond the edge. To fix the generation speed, I replaced the giant border in the tile map with 2 massive overlay squares, a simple trick that fakes infinite depth while letting the level load almost instantly. This resulted in generation speeds so quick that there's barely enough time to read the new tips on the loading screen. The last major change with the level generation is how the player progresses through the sections of the game. Biome progression has undergone several iterations over many years. Finally, I've decided to restrict the player's choice on which biome to go to so that the game is more linear. The new system works such that the first time you enter a biome, it's a normal level, meaning only enemies. Then, as you continuously descend into the biome, the number of doors that lead to a boss fight increases one by one. Eventually, every door will lead to a boss fight, and you must defeat the boss to continue your descent. This system prevents players from looping infinitely in the same biome to slowly grind up their experience. The unfortunate truth is, players will optimize the fun out of a game if given the chance. This also means that all of the resources are theoretically limited now, and that there is an inevitable nudge towards the boss and a subsequent biome. Overall, I think this is a good change and offers a different kind of decision for the player. Instead of deciding if they want to fight a boss or skip it, they now have to gear up so that they are ready for the fight. Outside of gameplay, I've addressed the world building and story of the game. It will take some time to integrate these ideas in a way that complements the gameplay, but the seeds have been planted. I've started by renaming the enemies and the other villagers, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. I hope to develop a more immersive world that tells the story through more than just written passages. To avoid spoilers, however, this is all I'll say for now. The last change that I want to mention was the mixels issue. If you're unaware, mixels are the combination of different size pixels in pixel art media. My game had 8x8 tiles, 16x16 sprites, and even some objects that had been rescaled in-engine. Ultimately, this made the game look unprofessional, so I updated the import size for every sprite to 8 pixels per unit. This made the previously 16x16 sprites twice as big, and the level became too cramped to move or dodge. So, I increased the size of the level to restore the original feel. After making the level bigger, the movement values needed to be scaled as well. Several adjustments later, and we're back at the same game, except each pixel is rendered at the same resolution. The only exception here being some of the user interface, which I'm still open to suggestions on. It might be a subtle change, but to me, it makes the game look and feel far more polished, and that's what matters. As these changes stage the game for its demo release, I hope to have it available for playtesting in the next couple weeks. My goals for the final stretch are to make sure that the game is polished and clear, and I'm ready to absorb the feedback you suggest. My plan beyond the demo is to ramp up the replayability with new abilities, an engaging statue redesign, and increased enemy and boss variety. Thanks again for your incredible support throughout this project. If you want to help shape the game before the release or just chat with other fans and devs, the Discord link is below. That's where I post my updates, ask for feedback, and hang out between videos. It's been a great place to collaborate with other devs and my main line of communication outside of these videos. Thanks again if you've made it to the end. I hope you have a great day.